I sat on the front porch of my grandparents' old Victorian, cradling a warm cup of coffee in the early morning quiet. The house creaked softly around me, familiar and comforting, filled with decades of memories. This place was mine now legally and completely, though the journey to protect it had tested every ounce of patience my grandfather ever taught me. The chipped paint on the porch, railing the squeaky third step, the way sunlight filtered through the oak tree out front. All of it reminded me why I fought so hard. I never imagined that protecting what they left me would mean going to war with my own family. Before I dive into how blood turned into betrayal, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit that like button and subscribe, because this story proves that sometimes the people closest to you are the ones you need to protect yourself from the most. Now let me take you back to where it all started. Growing up, my grandparents' house was my second home. While other kids spent weekends at amusement parks or shopping malls, I was in my grandfather's garage, learning how a transistor radio worked, or why you should never mix up positive and negative terminals. He had this way of teaching that made even the most complicated circuit board feel like a puzzle waiting to be solved. My grandmother, on the other hand, taught me patience through her garden. She would hand me a trowel and say, "Ellis, good things grow slow. Remember that." I learned more about life from those two than I ever did in any classroom. My older brother Garrett was different. He was always chasing the next big thing, the shortcut to success, the get-rich-quick scheme that never quite panned out. He visited our grandparents on holidays, stayed for dinner, and left before dessert was served. I never held it against him back then. We were just different people with different priorities. My mother, Linda, after her divorce from my father, leaned heavily on our grandparents for financial help. They never said no to her, even when I could see the worry lines deepen on my grandfather's forehead every time she called asking for money. When my grandparents started slowing down, I made the decision to move back to town. I took a remote position as a software engineer so I could be nearby. Garrett called it playing favorite when he found out. He still lived 3 states away, still chasing whatever dream was trending that month. I drove my grandfather to doctor appointments, helped my grandmother with grocery shopping, and spent evenings sitting with them on that same porch, listening to stories I had heard 100 times, but never grew tired of hearing. One evening about 6 months before they passed, my grandfather asked me to join him in his study. The room smelled like old books, and the cherry tobacco he was not supposed to be smoking anymore. He closed the door, something he rarely did, and sat down heavily in his leather chair. "Ellis, this house, the savings, everything we built, I am leaving it to you," he said, his voice steady but serious. I started to protest, but he held up his hand. "Let me finish. This is not about loving you more than your brother. This is about trust. Your grandmother and I worked our whole lives for this. We want it to mean something, not just turn into cash in someone's bank account within a month." He leaned forward, his eyes holding mine. "Your brother has your mother's eyes for quick money. You have my patience. You understand what it means to build something and protect it. Promise me you will not let this slip away." I promised. I did not know then how much that promise would cost me. 2 months later they were gone. A truck ran a red light on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The call came while I was in a meeting, and I remember the way the world seemed to tilt sideways when the hospital said they had both been pronounced dead at the scene. The funeral was a blur of black clothing and casseroles, and people telling me they were in a better place now, as if that made the emptiness any easier to bear. The will reading happened the following week at Mr. Patterson's law office downtown. The waiting room had uncomfortable chairs and outdated magazines. Garrett showed up 15 minutes late wearing a suit that looked like it cost more than my entire wardrobe. Linda sat between us, her hands folded in her lap, tissues already clutched in her fist. Mr. Patterson, a patient man in his 60s, with reading glasses that perched on the end of his nose, read through the standard legal language before getting to the heart of it. To me, Ellis, they left the house valued at approximately $650,000, their savings account, with $180,000 and a stock portfolio worth roughly $70,000. To Garrett, they left $25,000 in cash and our grandmother's jewelry collection. The silence that followed was deafening. Garrett's face went from confusion to shock to something harder, something that looked almost like rage. Linda actually gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. I sat frozen, overwhelmed by the weight of what had just been placed on my shoulders. Garrett recovered first, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. Well, congrats, little brother. Guess they really loved you more, huh? His voice had an edge to it, sharp and cutting. We left the office in tense silence. Garrett barely looked at me. Linda hugged me, but it felt mechanical, obligatory. As they walked to Garrett's car, I heard him mutter something to our mother, but I could not make out the words. Whatever it was, made her nod quickly. After they drove away, Mr. Patterson asked me to stay behind. He closed the door to his office and gestured for me to sit back down. Your grandfather came to see me 3 months before he passed. He was worried, Mr. Patterson said, pulling a file from his desk drawer. He knew this inheritance might cause problems. He specifically asked me to advise you on something. He explained the concept of a revocable living trust, a legal structure that would protect the assets from contestation and make it nearly impossible for anyone to challenge my ownership. It is like putting everything in a protective vault, he said. The property remains yours to use and control, but it is shielded from certain types of legal attacks. I took his advice seriously. Within the week, I met with him again and began the process of establishing the trust. We transferred the house deed, the bank accounts, and the stock portfolio into the Ellis Family Trust, with me listed as both trustee and beneficiary. The paperwork was detailed and thorough. Mr. Patterson kept copies of everything in his office safe, and I stored my copies in a fireproof box in my bedroom closet. When I signed the final documents, I felt a strange sense of relief, as if I had just locked a door that I had not realized was standing wide open. I thought I was being paranoid, I told Mr. Patterson as we shook hands. He smiled gently and said, Your grandfather was not a paranoid man. He was a prepared one. There is a difference. I left his office that day thinking I had overreacted. Turned out I was just being prepared. The first few weeks after the inheritance settled were quiet. I moved into my grandparents' house and started the slow process of making it feel like mine, while honoring their memory. I painted the guest bedroom, fixed a leak in the upstairs bathroom, and spent Saturday mornings tending to my grandmother's roses. It felt peaceful, like I was exactly where I was supposed to be. Then Garrett started calling. At first it was casual. Just checking in, he would say. How's the house you settling in, okay? But the conversations always drifted toward value. Have you thought about what it's worth on today's market? Or I bet with some renovations you could flip it for a profit. I deflected as politely as I could. I am not planning to sell Garrett. This was their home. I want to keep it. His tone would shift, then becoming cooler, more insistent. It is just a house, Ellis. They are gone. Why tie yourself down to an old building when you could have real money in your pocket? Because it is more than a building to me, I replied. It is their legacy. He stopped calling for a few days after that, but then Linda started. She needed $15,000 to handle some bills. When I asked for details, she became vague and defensive. I offered to help with $5,000, which I transferred from my personal account, not from the inheritance. It was all I could reasonably afford, without dipping into what my grandparents had left. $5,000, she said, her voice rising. Ellis, your grandparents would want you to help family. You are sitting on almost $1 million, and they left it to me to manage responsibly. I said, hating how cold I sounded. I am helping where I can, but I cannot just hand out chunks of money every time someone asks. She hung up on me. The next day, Garrett called back. This time there was no pretense of small talk. Mom is struggling, and you are hoarding money like some kind of miser, he said. This is not what Grandma and Grandpa would have wanted. They made their wishes very clear. In the will, I responded, keeping my voice level. I am respecting their decision. We will see about that, Garrett said, and hung up before I could respond. 3 days later, he and Linda showed up at the house, unannounced. I was in the backyard trimming hedges when I heard the doorbell. By the time I walked around front, they were already on the porch. Garrett's hand still on the doorbell. "We need to talk," Linda said, not meeting my eyes. I let them in and we sat in the living room. Garrett wasted no time. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech. "Look, Ellis, Mom's been struggling financially. You know that. Garrett and I have been talking, and we think the best solution is to sell the house and split the proceeds 3 ways. It is only fair." "The will was clear," I said, feeling my jaw tighten. "This is not up for debate." Linda finally looked at me, and there were actual tears in her eyes. "I am your mother. Do you not care that I am drowning in debt, that I might lose my apartment?" I wanted to feel sympathetic. Part of me did. But I also knew that my mother had been drowning in debt for as long as I could remember, and my grandparents had bailed her out countless times. This was not about helping her survive. This was about her wanting a lump sum to solve problems that money had never fixed before. "I care," I said quietly. "But Grandpa made his choice for a reason. I am respecting that. I have already helped you with what I can afford." Garrett stood up abruptly. "They were my grandparents too, Ellis. This is not fair. You are being selfish." "Then take it up with the will," I said, standing to match his energy. "I did not write it. They did." Linda stood too, wringing her hands. "Let us just go, Garrett. This is not working." They left without another word, but as they walked to the car, I heard Garrett whisper to Linda, "Do not worry. We will figure something out." I stood in the doorway watching them drive away, and felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Something in his tone told me this was not over. 3 months passed. Radio silence. No calls, no texts, no surprise visits. I told myself they had accepted the situation and moved on. I focused on renovations. I repainted the exterior trim, replaced the old roof shingles, and planted new flowers in the garden beds my grandmother had loved so much. Every improvement felt like a tribute to them, a way of saying thank you for trusting me with this. One evening in late September, I received an email from the county recorder's office. It was a generic notification about a request for document verification regarding property, followed by my address. Confused, I called the office the next morning. "Yes, sir," the clerk said. "Someone submitted a request to verify ownership documents for that property." "Let me see." The request came from a Garrett Monroe. My stomach dropped. What does that mean? What is he trying to do? "I cannot say for certain," the clerk replied, "but it is usually part of a process when someone is disputing ownership or preparing to file a claim." I thanked her, hung up, and immediately called Mr. Patterson. He told me not to worry yet, that verification requests were common and did not necessarily mean anything. "But keep me informed if anything else happens," he added. I tried to shake off the unease, but it lingered like smoke. Saturday morning arrived bright and clear. I was on the porch, coffee in hand, enjoying the quiet before the day really started. That is when I saw the black Mercedes pull up to the curb. Garrett stepped out, first dressed in dark jeans and a button-down shirt, a brown envelope in his hand. Linda emerged from the passenger side, looking smaller, somehow her shoulders hunched. Garrett walked up the path with a grin that made my blood run cold. It was not a happy grin. It was triumphant, predatory. "Morning, little brother," he called out. "Beautiful day. Is it not?" I set my coffee down slowly. "What do you want, Garrett?" He waved the envelope. "Just came to deliver some news. Good news for me, anyway." Linda stayed a few steps behind him, still not looking at me. My hands clenched into fists at my sides. Garrett climbed the porch steps and pulled a stack of papers from the envelope. "Remember how Mom's name was still on some old paperwork from when Grandpa refinanced back in 2008? My heart started pounding. "What are you talking about?" He held up the papers, that grin widening. "Well, with a good lawyer and Mom's signature, we managed to get the deed transferred. House is in my name now, Ellis. Legally, officially." He thrust the papers toward me. I took them with shaking hands and scanned the top page. It was a deed transfer document stamped and notarized, showing the property transferred from Linda Monroe to Garrett Monroe. It looked legitimate, official, terrifyingly real. "You have got until Friday to move out," Garrett said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. "I am selling this place. Already have a buyer lined up. Should close by the end of the month." Linda finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "It is for the best, Ellis. We need this." I stared at the papers, my mind racing. For a moment, panic seized me. Then I remembered the trust, the careful planning, the protection Mr. Patterson had built around everything my grandparents had left me. Slowly I looked up at Garrett and I felt my face relax into something like a smile. "You really think I would let that happen?" Garrett's grin faltered slightly. "It is done, Ellis. I have the paperwork. Look at it. It is all legal." "We will see about that," I said calmly, folding the papers and handing them back to him. "What is that supposed to mean?" Garrett demanded. I stepped back and put my hand on the doorknob. "It means you should have done better research before committing fraud." I closed the door in his face and leaned against it, my heart hammering. Through the window, I watched Garrett's face shift from confusion to anger. He pounded on the door once, twice, then stormed back to his car. Linda followed, glancing back at the house with something that might have been regret. As soon as they drove away, I grabbed my phone and called Mr. Patterson. I sat at my kitchen table, the fraudulent deed transfer spread out in front of me, and carefully read every word. The more I studied it, the more I saw the cracks. They had taken an old document from 2008-1 that referenced a refinance my grandfather had done, and somehow manipulated it to make it look like my mother still had ownership rights. The signature looked like my grandfather's, but the ink was too fresh, the paper too crisp, for something supposedly 14 years old. Mr. Patterson arrived within an hour. He spread his own documents across the table next to theirs, trust paperwork, the original will official transfer records, showing how every asset had moved into the trust months ago. "This is forgery," he said flatly, tapping Garrett's papers. "And it is fraud. They are trying to exploit a loophole that does not actually exist." "Can they do this?" I asked. "Can they actually take the house?" "No," Mr. Patterson said firmly, "because you do not technically own the house anymore. The trust does. You are the trustee and beneficiary, but the property is held by the trust entity. Even if this deed were legitimate, which it absolutely is not, it would have no legal standing. The trust is untouchable." Relief flooded through me, followed quickly by anger. "So what do? "We fight back," he said, "and we fight hard. We spent the afternoon building our case." Mr. Patterson contacted the county recorder's office and discovered that Garrett had filed the fraudulent deed transfer just 2 days earlier. The office had not yet completed their verification process due to a backlog, which meant the transfer was not officially recorded. Mr. Patterson immediately filed a motion to block the transfer and submitted the trust documents as proof of legitimate ownership. Then we went further. He helped me file a police report for forgery and fraud, documenting every detail of Garrett's scheme. I provided screenshots of threatening text messages Garrett had sent over the past months, messages I had saved, without really knowing why. I also admitted something I had done that morning, something that felt sneaky, but turned out to be crucial. When Garrett had handed me those papers on the porch, I had my phone in my pocket recording audio. I had started the recording. The moment I saw his car pull up, some instinct telling me I needed to document whatever was about to happen. The recording captured everything: Garrett's gloating confession, his statement about having the house signed into his name, his threat to have me out by Friday. "This is gold," Mr. Patterson said, listening to the playback. He essentially confessed to the whole scheme. This recording, combined with the forged documents, gives us everything we need. We prepared a restraining order to prevent Garrett from coming near the property. Mr. Patterson also contacted the district attorney's office about potential criminal prosecution. "They take this kind of thing seriously," he explained. "Real estate fraud, forgery. These are not minor offenses." By the time we finished, it was early evening. I felt exhausted, but strangely calm. "What happens next?" I asked. Now we wait for them to make their next move, Mr. Patterson said, and when they do, we will be ready. Tuesday came faster than I expected. I was inside the house, watching through the living room window, when I saw the moving truck rumble down the street. It was massive, one of those trucks you rent when you are moving an entire household. Behind it came Garrett's Mercedes, with Linda in the passenger seat. My pulse quickened, but I did not move. I just watched. The truck stopped in front of the house. Two men in work clothes climbed out of the cab and opened the back. Garrett parked behind them and got out, pointing toward my house, gesturing broadly. I could not hear what he was saying, but his body language was clear. He was giving orders, directing them to start loading furniture. He walked up to the porch and pounded on the door, loud and aggressive. "Ellis, open up. Time's up." I waited a beat, then another, letting him knock again before I calmly walked to the door and opened it. "Can I help you?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Do not play games," Garrett snapped. "You were supposed to be out by Friday. It is Tuesday. I gave you extra time out of the goodness of my heart. Did you? Now," I said. "That is generous." Something in my tone made him pause, his eyes narrowing. Behind him, Linda climbed out of the car, wrapping her cardigan tighter around herself despite the warm day. "Ellis, please," she called out. "Do not make this harder than it needs to be." Garrett turned and waved at the movers. "Come on up, guys. Start with the living room." That is when I heard it, the sound of another car pulling up. I did not look, but I saw Garrett's face change, confusion replacing his confidence. A car door slammed. Footsteps on pavement. Mr. Patterson came into view, climbing the porch steps in a perfectly pressed suit, briefcase in hand. Right behind him was a uniformed police officer from the county sheriff's department. Garrett and Linda froze. "Good morning, Garrett." Linda, Mr. Patterson said pleasantly, as if we were meeting for brunch instead of a confrontation. Who are you?" Garrett stammered, though recognition was already dawning in his eyes. "Daniel Patterson, Ellis's attorney. We met at the will reading, remember?" He smiled, but it was not friendly. "I have some documents here I think you should see." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a folder thick with papers. "This is a certified copy of the living trust established by Ellis 4 months ago. Every asset inherited from your grandparents, including this house, was legally transferred into that trust. Ellis is the trustee and sole beneficiary." He held up another document. "This is the original deed showing the property transfer into the trust, properly recorded with the county. It predates your fraudulent filing by 3 months. Garrett's face went pale. That is not." Mr. Patterson continued, his voice calm but cutting. "The deed transfer you filed last week is null and void. Not only does it have no legal standing because the property is held in trust, but it is also based on forged documents. Your mother's name was removed from all property records in 2012 when your grandfather executed a quitclaim deed. The document you used is fabricated." He turned to the police officer and handed over a separate set of papers. "Officer, I have here the forged documents, the legitimate trust paperwork, and a recording of Mr. Monroe admitting to the scheme." The officer took the papers, glanced at them, then looked at Garrett. "Sir, I am going to need you to come with me. We have questions about document forgery and attempted real estate fraud." Linda let out a sound somewhere between a gasp and a sob. "Garrett, what did you do? You said this was legal. You said, 'It is legal.'" Garrett shouted, but his voice cracked. "That is Mom's signature. She had rights to that property." "Your mother had no rights to this property," Mr. Patterson said coldly. "And even if she did, the trust makes this entire scheme pointless. You did not just fail, Mr. Monroe. You committed multiple felonies in the process." The movers, who had been standing awkwardly by the truck this whole time, quietly climbed back into the cab. One of them started the engine. They were not getting involved in whatever this was. Garrett looked at me, his face twisted with rage. You set me up. You planned this. I shook my head slowly. No, Garrett. I protected what was mine. You set yourself up the moment you decided to forge documents and commit fraud. I just made sure I was ready when you did. The officer stepped forward, one hand resting on the handcuffs at his belt. Mr. Monroe, you need to come with me. Now. This is insane, Garrett protested, but he did not resist as the officer guided him toward the patrol car. I was trying to help our mother. I was trying to fix an unfair situation. By breaking the law, the officer said simply. Linda stood on the sidewalk, tears streaming down her face. She looked at me, and for a moment I saw something like understanding in her eyes, or maybe just defeat. I did not know he was going to do this, she said quietly. He told me it was legal. He said his lawyer had found a way. I did not respond. I did not know what to say to her. Part of me felt sorry for her. Part of me was angry that she had gone along with it at all. The patrol car pulled away with Garrett in the back seat. The moving truck followed shortly after, leaving just Linda standing alone on the street. She looked small and lost. Mr. Patterson put a hand on my shoulder. You did the right thing. Your grandfather would be proud. I watched Linda slowly walk to Garrett's Mercedes, get in and drive away. When she was gone, I let out a long breath I had not realized I was holding. I never wanted it to come to this, I said quietly. I know, Mr. Patterson replied. But sometimes protecting what matters means standing firm, even against family. 2 weeks later, I sat in a courtroom for Garrett's preliminary hearing. The room smelled like old wood and stress. Garrett sat at the defendant's table, with a public defender, looking smaller than I remembered, his confident swagger completely gone. Linda sat in the back row, her hands folded in her lap, staring at nothing. The charges were laid out clearly: forgery, attempted fraud, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged documents, the recording of Garrett's confession on my porch text messages, showing premeditation, all of it painted a picture of someone who had knowingly and deliberately broken the law. Garrett took a plea deal. He would serve 2 years of probation, complete 300 hours of community service, and pay restitution covering all of my legal fees. In exchange, the prosecutor agreed not to pursue jail time. Linda was not charged, the district attorney's office determining that she had been manipulated by Garrett and had not fully understood the illegal nature of what they were doing. However, she had to testify against him, confirming that Garrett had orchestrated the entire plan. When the judge asked Garrett if he had anything to say, he stood slowly. I was trying to help my mother, he said, his voice barely audible. I thought it was unfair that Ellis got everything. I thought I was fixing a mistake. The judge was not sympathetic. What you thought you were fixing, you attempted to accomplish through fraud and deception. That is not justice. That is crime. You are fortunate the prosecutor offered you this deal. After the hearing, I walked out into the bright afternoon sunshine. Mr. Patterson met me on the courthouse steps. The county recorder's office officially recognized the trust as the sole legal owner this morning, he said. No one can challenge your ownership again. It is done. Thank you, I said, and meant it more than he could possibly know. For everything. Your grandfather knew exactly what he was doing when he came to see me, Mr. Patterson said with a slight smile. He was a wise man. He saw this coming and made sure you were protected. I went home that day and walked through every room of the house, really seeing it for the first time since the whole ordeal began. The afternoon light filtered through the kitchen window the way it always had when my grandmother baked cookies. The study still smelled faintly of my grandfather's cherry tobacco. The garden, which I had been neglecting during the legal battle, needed tending. I sat on the porch that evening, the same spot where this whole mess had exploded, and felt the weight of it all settling on my shoulders. Not the weight of burden, but the weight of responsibility, and legacy, and understanding. I had won, but it did not feel like victory. It felt like loss, like watching a bridge burn that I had never wanted to cross again anyway. Over the following months, I threw myself into making the house truly mine, while honoring what it had been. I renovated the upstairs bathroom, updating the fixtures, but keeping the vintage tile my grandmother had picked out in the 1970s. I converted my grandfather's garage workspace into a small home office for my software work, carefully preserving his old workbench in the corner. I restored the garden, planting new roses alongside the ones my grandmother had loved, adding a small bench where I could sit and think. 6 months after the court hearing, a letter arrived in the mail. It was from Linda, handwritten on plain stationery. Her handwriting was shaky, uncertain. Ellis, I do not know if you will read this, or if you will throw it away. I would not blame you if you did. I want you to know that I am sorry. I let Garrett convince me that we were owed something, that your grandparents had been unfair. I see now that they were not unfair at all. They knew what they were doing. They knew who would protect their legacy, and who would squander it. You were right to fight. You were right to protect what they gave you. I hope someday you can forgive me. I hope someday I can forgive myself. Mom, I read the letter 3 times, folded it carefully, and put it in a drawer. I did not respond right away. Maybe someday I would. Maybe not. Forgiveness was complicated when the wound was still fresh, when trust had been shattered so completely. A year after inheriting the house, I stood on the porch on a Saturday morning, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the neighborhood. The house behind me was solid and secure, legally protected, physically restored, filled with both memory and new life. I had turned one of the spare bedrooms into a guest room, hopeful that someday I might have friends or family who deserved to stay there. The garden was thriving, bursting with color every season. I thought about my grandfather's words that night in his study. Protecting something valuable sometimes means protecting it from the people you love. I understood now. He had not been cruel or cold when he structured his will the way he did. He had been realistic. He had known his family understood their weaknesses and strengths, and made the hard choice to protect what he and my grandmother had built. I learned something profound through this experience. Something that changed how I saw family and loyalty and love. I learned that sometimes love is not enough to overcome greed. That blood relation does not automatically equal trustworthiness. That the people who claim to care about you the most can be the ones who hurt you the deepest when money is involved. But I also learned about strength. Not the kind that comes from muscle or aggression, but the kind that comes from standing firm when everything in you wants to give in for the sake of peace. My grandparents did not leave me that house because they loved me more than Garrett. They left it because they knew I would honor what it represented, that I would see beyond its monetary value to its real worth. As a home, a legacy, a piece of family history worth preserving. Garrett saw dollar signs where I saw memories. He saw a quick payout where I saw responsibility. And that difference, more than anything else, explained why my grandparents made the choice they did. I do not regret fighting for this house. I do not regret standing up to my brother and mother when they tried to take it through deception and fraud. Protecting what matters is not about being cruel or unforgiving. It is about being strong enough to say no, to draw boundaries, to refuse to be manipulated even by people who share your blood. That house still stands today. Every room tells a story. The kitchen where my grandmother taught me to make her famous apple pie. The garage where my grandfather showed me how to fix anything with patience and the right tools. The garden where I learned that good things grow slow, just like she promised. And now, new stories too. The office where I built my freelance business. The living room where I hosted friends for the first time. The porch where I drink my coffee every morning and remember why all of this mattered. I finally understand why my grandfather trusted me with it. It was never just about the house or the money. It was about understanding that some things are worth more than their price tag, that legacy is built on respect and care, and the willingness to fight for what matters, when everyone else just wants to cash out. Some people inherit money. I inherited a lesson about what truly matters, about the difference between cost and value, about standing firm in the face of pressure from the people who should support you most. And that lesson, that understanding, that strength, that is worth more than any dollar amount on any estate appraisal. The house is mine. The lesson is mine, and I will protect both, for as long as I am able, just like I promised my grandfather I would. Have you ever had to stand up to family to protect something important? What would you have done in my situation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real stories about life's complicated moments. Share this with someone who needs to hear that it is okay to set boundaries even with family. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it reminds you that protecting what truly matters is never the wrong choice, even when it costs you relationships you wish you could have kept. Take care of yourselves out there, and remember, legacy is not about money. It is about what you choose to preserve and why.